At last, the police seemed to have caught a break, and 3 core members of the Death Patrol were at least momentarily taken off of the streets. Meanwhile, the 4th major player in the gang, Shobra, had escaped the situation to Spain. Here, the Death Patrol had reportedly established some major connections with local criminal organisations. However, this meant that their associates in the streets of Rinkeby would be left without their enforcers. One of these was a young man named Kara, who was an old friend of Masla. Kara had been convicted in 2015 of another robbery which had been carried out around the same time as the infamous Forex robbery, where Masla had in fact been one of the suspects. Kara was apparently also close with Masla's little brother, Machiavelli, and had recently even been the person who drove him to the hospital after he had been shot. Now, it was this association that very well may have put him on the Shotters hit list, because on New Year's Eve, Kara was found dead in a parking garage in Rinkeby, having been shot 8 times, including in the head, and dying at the scene. In the days that followed, Kara's friends and family would create a memorial for him at the site of the murder, with the core members of the Death Patrol off the streets for the time being and another one of their associates dead. It seemed at this point that the deadly war for Sweden's streets was tipping in the Shotters' favour, but the younger members of the Death Patrol were desperate to prove themselves to the older guys like Machiavelli that they had what it takes to become so-called 100 guys. This is a term used to describe loyal, young soldiers who were ready to do 4 years in a closed youth home for committing an underage homicide. They knew that the Swedish state wouldn't punish these younger members for acts of violence, and they would carry their willingness to crash out as a badge of honour. About a week after Kara's death, on the 8th of January 2018, Shotters affiliate Hamza, also known as Peps, was hanging out at Rinkeby Centre. According to some, Hamza was not much involved with the gang life, which is why he actually felt safe hanging out in the middle of Rinkeby. The police would later find out some interesting messages that his girlfriend had sent him, suggesting that even she wanted to be part of the alluring gang lifestyle. There were also rumours circulating that Hamza had actually given the location of Kara to Shotters members before his murder, which had ultimately made him a target. After hanging out in the centre of town for some time, Hamza went to eat at a local pizza place, where he would meet some friends. However, at this point, Hamza had seemingly been followed by affiliates of the Death Patrol, including people who were already inside of the restaurant. Then, at around 7:30 PM, security cameras would capture somebody walking confidently into the pizza place, entering the door just as somebody else was exiting. At this point, they would immediately raise a handgun, shooting Hamza twice in the head and neck, and immediately running away. Soon after the brazen execution, photos taken of Hamza's lifeless body would begin spreading on social media, and the news would begin to report of both the murder and the fact that the gang war had continued to play out on social media. The police were first suspecting Kara's older brother for the murder, and they started surveilling and tapping his phone, where they would hear him imply that he'd had something to do with it, catching him making the ominous statement, "Just as they took one from me, I took one from them," and vowing to continue to get it back in blood for his gang. While being surveilled, Kara's brother would have a meeting with a man named Dumle. This was a Death Patrol affiliate who would later become a notorious figure in the gang, along with a 16-year-old boy named Shaki, who was one of the young people in Rinkeby allegedly selling drugs for the Death Patrol. Looking into Shaki, the police would find interesting similarities with the shooter, including matching gloves and shoes. Further search warrants on different locations would also uncover a cache of serious firearms, one of them actually turning out to be the murder weapon where Shaki's DNA was also found. Police would also find messages between Shaki and the core members of the Death Patrol, indicating that the underage boy was used as a contract killer by the gang, knowing that he would receive a much shorter sentence, earning him the status as a 100 guy. At least partly due to the huge disparity in adult and underage sentencing, using these so-called child soldiers would increasingly become common amongst Sweden's gangsters. Shaki would eventually be found guilty, becoming the first to actually be convicted of murder in this war that had so far claimed so many lives. But, of course, as an underage offender, he would only receive 3 years in a closed youth home, even 1 year less than the 4-year maximum. In many ways, Sweden's liberal and empathetic approach to crime was creating an obstacle to the authorities tackling the serious violence playing out on their streets. But ironically, it would take the war spilling into a neighbouring country for the perpetrators to be punished with the full force of the law. But for the time being, the Swedish authorities would continue their losing battle, as they would continue to attempt to get some of the most high-profile gangster rappers off of the streets.